Good to see you all. You're here, which means you got the memo that it was time to spring forward. Otherwise, you'd be here in an hour. Apparently, I didn't get the memo. We're not going to spring forward in the Bible. We're going to fall back because we got to go back and pick up Esther. Like I said, Ezra and Nehemiah, we skipped those, not because they're not interesting, because I don't know what to say about them. Maybe someday we'll go back and pick those up. But Esther, I have things to say about Esther. I have things to say about it because I've had good material to read. A lot of times what we need is a kickstart. We need somebody to start to show us insights, and then we can start to pick up on those ourselves. We can start to see more things. And so Rabbi David Foreman wrote a great book called The Queen You Thought You Knew. There's also a great episode by Josh Bassett on Bema about Esther. Great things to help you begin to understand what this story is about. And so let's just, before we dig in, have you all ever watched a movie as a kid and then, not seen it for 20 years and then later watch that as an adult and you're like, well, I don't remember this at all. Like, this is a completely different movie. I mean, not that, like, you forgot the movie, but you watch the same scene and you're like, this is what this scene meant to me as a kid, and now this is completely different. I'm getting a lot of head shakes, right? And there's a couple reasons for that. I mean, some of it has to do with sexuality, like, that stuff goes over your head as a kid, and then you see it as an adult. But there are a lot of other things too. Like, you'll see how a character reacts to something, and you just did not understand what they were going through as a kid. And then when you're an adult, you're like, I get that. I know what they're going through. I know what's going on here. And part of the reason you didn't get it as a kid is because these things aren't really said. It's not said explicitly out loud. You just understand what's going on. And you're able to understand the story. I hope that Esther is like that for you. I hope that we have gotten enough of the context, enough of the tools to be able to look at this story and with a little bit of additional context, begin to understand what's going on and see a much richer, much deeper, much nuanced, much messier story than what we saw before. So the chapter opens, or the book opens, and we have this king, Xerxes, and he's throwing this big party. For 127 provinces, he's throwing a party. And that alone ought to make us kind of go like, what's going on here? This king is throwing a party? Because not too long ago, we were reading about Abram, and there was a war that was going on in his area, and there were 4 kings that were going up against 5 kings, and they were going to war, and when they got done, they carried off all the possessions and the women and the children. And I don't think they were throwing a party for the people that they conquered. I don't think that's what was going on. And, it was 4 kings against 5, and now we got 127 provinces. Like, this is much bigger at this point. And I think a way to kind of understand that is, in Abram's day, those 4 kings might have been like the mayors of like Princeton, Bluefield, Virginia, and West Virginia, and Tazewell, and these towns, and they got together and they fought against 5 other towns around, think of whatever. And that's what was going on. They were going to war against each other. And now, this guy Xerxes, he ranks from India to Africa. It's kind of like the southeastern U.S., from North Carolina down to Florida, all the way over to the Mississippi. So empire has grown. Empire has evolved too. What's been going on through not just like history, but the whole story up to this point, we've seen it in the story. Why are those kings taking the women and the children? because we had a battle today and we won the battle, and we want to make sure that we win the next battle. We want to make sure that 10 years from now, when we have another battle, because it's going to be one, that we win. And so what do? They go and they conquer this village, or they conquer these men, and then they go back to their village where they live, or town, or whatever, and you see a young boy that's 5 years old. And what do they see when they see a young boy that's 5 years old? In 10 years, he's going to be 15, and he's going to have a sword in his hand. We're taking him with us, and when he's 15, he's going to fight for us. And when they see the women that are there, they see these women are going to have children, and those children, half of them are going to be men, and they're going to grow up to be fighters. And the other half will be women, and they will grow up to make more fighters. And it's not just about people. I mean, we read about the other Philistines. When they were dominating the Israelites, they made sure that they did not have any blacksmiths in the land. If you want your tools sharpened, you got to take them to Philistine to get them sharpened, because you're not going to have any weapons. And we're going to come around at every harvest, and we're going to take most of your food so that you're starving to death. And so it seems like once one side gets the upper hand, how is the other side ever going to rise up? Now, part of what we read through the story is that God hears the cry and he comes to their aid. But there's another factor that's going on. The people that are dominated, that are growing up, they live a hard life. They got to scrap and hide and fight and run just to survive. And what happens to someone that grows up in that environment? They get tough. Hard times make hard men. And eventually they get desperate enough and tough enough that they go and they fight against these other guys who've had it good. Like, they didn't even have to work for all of their food. They just went and took some of it. They didn't have to fight to be the dominant male to get women, because they were taking women from this other place. And soft times make soft men. Hard men rise up and they turn hard times into soft times. Soft times creates soft men. Soft men have a way of taking soft times and turning them into hard times. Now, that's another way to look at the story of this time period and what's been happening. Until this kingdom rises up, and they are so brutal, so good at this domineering thing, that they take over the whole region. That's not the Persians, that's the Assyrians. They are so, I want to say so bad or so good, they're so good at being bad that they take over the whole area. But it doesn't last very long. They're replaced by the Babylonians. And then they are replaced by the Persians. And this is the kingdom that we've had here. The empire has grown. It's not just little towns fighting each other. It's now this whole region of the world, basically the known world, you could say, that's being dominated. And the tactics have now changed. The Persians come along and they see what's happened and they realize, like, maybe this isn't the way. Like the Assyrians were so good at this thing that we've been doing, and it didn't work out for them. They have been all stick. Maybe we need to add some carrot to this. Maybe if we give these 127 provinces that we've conquered, that we now have, maybe if we give them a little incentive and say that things aren't so bad, if we make the times not so hard, they won't be that tough and they won't be that desperate and they won't overthrow us. And so the Persians come around and they're this more balanced carrot and stick. They're definitely not all carrot, okay? They're gonna grind you into the dust if you go against them. But they would prefer to be carrot, and they're more about being good at this carrot thing. And so that is why Xerxes brings the leaders of these 127 provinces to the capital, and for 180 days, he displays his wealth and the splendor of this kingdom. Why is he doing that? He wants them to go back to their province. And what kind of story does he want them to tell? This empire that we're a part of, it's incredible. They have made things that men have never heard of. And the king, boy, you want to go to one of his feasts. Have you ever been to a feast where they didn't cut you off at the bar? I've been to one. That's the kind of feast that the king throws. And so the whole thing is he's setting up this story so that these governors will go back and they'll tell the people like, we don't need to rebel. This is great. This kingdom's the best thing that ever happened. You want to be part of this kingdom. Empire has evolved. This is no longer Pharaoh with his stick beating his slaves into submission. This is Pharaoh holding out a carrot and saying, come be part of this. Come drink my wine. Come eat my meat. Be part of this kingdom. It seems like everything is going swimmingly. Everything is going to plan until at the very end of this thing, he gets the idea, I got one more thing I'm going to show him. One more thing I'm going to show him. And this is going to seal the deal. And they're going to go home and they're just going to be over the moon about how this kingdom is. I'll bring out my wife. It goes downhill from here. Because what's been going on? Who's been at this feast that the king is throwing? It's all the guys, right? See, they're over here. They're having their feast. The wine is flowing. And then they get the idea, hey, bring out the most beautiful woman in the kingdom and bring them over. That sounds about right? Meanwhile, Vashti has been throwing a feast for the women over here. And what do you think they've been talking about? What happens when you have all the women together and they're in polite society, things are going well, and they start talking? What do they start talking about? Throughout history, what have they started to talk about? The men. Start talking about the men, the way things are, and I'm not really happy with this. You know why? Because this kingdom is set up for them. It might be a great kingdom for them. It's not so great for us. In fact, I think we ought to get a say in how things are going. Maybe the next leader of the land shouldn't be a king. Maybe it should be a queen. And then the 7 eunuchs come over and whisper in her ear, hey, the king wants you to come over. I'm busy. I'm throwing a feast for the women over here. Well, the king really insists that you come wearing your crown and nothing else. Humph! And she says no. If the men over here in their feast represent empire, what do the women over here represent? The subjugated ones. And they have said, no, we will not bow to your demands.
Case closed.
Case closed, it would seem. Now, do you see the problem this has created for Xerxes? 180 days of displaying his wealth. The 7-day feast where the wine flows liberally. Everything has went well until this has gone as bad as it could possibly go. What are the 127 governors going to go back and tell their people?
He did it good until he tried to get his wife to do what he wanted.
I don't know. I think they have forgotten all about the wealth and splendor of this place. That is not even going to make it into the story.
Well, it says what they say. I mean, eventually they get around to, well, what if my wife starts talking like that?
And so that's what's happening on the surface. But that's not what this is about. That's not what this is about. The king is trying to get all of his provinces in line. And now Vashti has just shown we can just say no. And in fact, if you think about the king's position here, like he's trying something that's never been tried. Nobody, as far as I know, or at least in this area, within their recent memory, nobody has tried to set up a kingdom this way. Nobody has tried to entice all of the provinces to want to be part of the kingdom. They have always tried to put their boot on their throats and make them be part of the kingdom. Is it going to work? And it seems like the answer is no. And if these 127 governors go back to their provinces and they tell the story about what the king does, this is awful. The whole kingdom is going to disintegrate because of this. And so he has this problem. What is he going to do? Now, what do you think a king's first reaction is going to be when someone tells him no when he's asked them to do something? Exactly. That would be his first reaction. But he doesn't do that. Why doesn't he do that? He cannot do that. He just spent 180 days laying out the carrot in front of everyone, saying, you want to be part of this kingdom because how great it is. If she says no and then he kills her, what's the story going to be when these guys go back? It's still going to be about this incident with Vashti. And it's still now going to be a carrot that's all about the stick, an empire that's all about the stick, right? And it's going to be the only thing that they talk about. It's going to erase the whole 187 days before. So you think like, well, what we need to do, maybe we could go in this direction like, killing her has to be as brutal as possible. We have to come up with the most brutal way that you could ever kill someone. This isn't helping your case. This isn't making it better. You're just making this more of the story. You're just making this more of what they're going to talk about. You're just erasing what you did before even more. So you think like, well, what if we go less and less and less? Like, what if you just disappear her? Now, wait a minute. Now we're getting it. The king gets his advisors together, and one of them, he sees the problem. The problem is not what Vashti did. The problem is how the 127 governors perceive what's going on. We need to make this a nothing burger. We need to make this so banal that the people forget that it even happened. And so he comes up with this idea that at first seems like, I'll tell you what it seems like. We have this king, right, showing this feast, wants his wife to come out wearing just the crown. She says no, and his answer is, well, you'll never see me again. I mean, he's just begging Taylor Swift to write a song about this, about how she never wanted to see him again anyway. But what is the message there? I'm doing the worst thing that I could possibly do to you, which is that you'll never see me again. Whew, that's some ego there. Some ego. But that's the message that he's sending. And he's making it a nothing burger, so they're not going to talk about it. And he's saying, what happens to the leaders of the subjugated group who don't fall in line? They get replaced. We will find another queen who is better to take her place. What do you think the 127 governors are hearing. Oh, if I don't do what he says, he's just going to find someone else to take my place to lead my province. This is genius. It is exactly what he needs to do. It's 4D chess on this political maneuvering. That's what his advisor has said. Let me stop there. I'll take a break just a second. Thoughts? Things that you're seeing in this? Any comments you have? All right. Yes.
Is it fair to say that it says in the text that he wanted his queen to wear her royal crown in order to display her beauty to the people, and of course she refused? It may be the right interpretation to say that he wants her wearing nothing but the crown, but that is not explicitly stated there. If he wanted her to wear the crown and display her beauty fully clothed, why would she object to that so strongly, I guess? So you're probably not the only one that concludes that when it says that he wanted her to wear her crown and display her beauty, that he's wanting her to appear without any clothing. Is that what you...
That is what the sages say. So there's a lot of things that are not said explicitly that you can infer. Right. What I want you to do, though, is to think beyond that. Even if he had asked her to, I got a special gown, like I want you to wear that special gown. Right. And she's over here with the women, with the subjugated parties, and she is the host of this feast, and he's asking her to step away from her feast and come over here and look pretty for the drunken men. It doesn't matter really what, and I think that's why it doesn't say, it doesn't matter what he's asked her to wear.
Right, and it's entirely possible that he went to that extreme because he's probably intoxicated.
Right. But the story is like, you're not the king of me. You don't get to order me. You don't get to tell me to put on heels and makeup and this dress and come twirl around for the men. You don't get to do that. That's the story that's happening here. And so, and I said like the response is that, well, she doesn't get to be queen anymore. She never gets to see me again. But he also says, he puts out this decree, every man will be head of his household. It's a double entendre in that he's saying, I am head of this household. And also, yes, all the men in this kingdom are heads of their household. Let's make sure we get the order right. Let's make sure we understand who's in charge and who follows orders. In your household, the wife better follow the husband's orders. In this kingdom, you all better follow my orders. And that's the story behind the story that's happening here. All right, so later, the king's fury subsides. And we've got to come up with a plan to get a new queen. Let's select all the most beautiful young women over the kingdom. Bring them in. Let them have a contest in front of the king. He will select the one he likes, and she will become the queen. There's this guy, Mordecai. He has adopted this girl. She is his uncle's daughter. Her parents have died. She's an orphan. He takes her in to his household. He enters her into this contest, says, don't tell anyone what your lineage is. Don't tell them that you're a Jew. That ringing a bell? Does that sound like anybody? Sounds exactly like Abraham. Abraham takes in Sarai, who is his niece. It's not exactly the same relation, but this close family member from the brother is orphaned. I need to take care of her. Mordecai's like Abraham in this sense, right? Now, he doesn't marry her. He raises her as a daughter. then does Sarah end up in the harem of the foreign king? Yes. Why does she end up there? Well, because Abram said, don't tell them you're my wife. This is exactly like Abraham. Now here's my question to you. What is the author saying about Mordecai? He's like Abraham. Is he like the good parts of Abraham? In a way, like he's the good part of Abraham that he adopted, he's taking care of this girl, right? But also, no, he's like the worst part of Abraham. He's making the same mistake that Abraham made. Now, let's look at the differences. Is he making exactly the same mistake that Abraham made? No, he's much worse. Much worse.
Well, it goes with the theme of the book. Where is God? It's kind of the same. We're in a book where God is not mentioned a single time. We see the hints of it, but we also see that even they're like, one time you're a Jew, it's almost like they're purposely removing God in some areas to just, like, where is he? So it seems like it goes along with the theme.
Well, it's an interesting dichotomy because he's going to tell her, don't tell anybody you're a Jew. What is he going to say?
He's going to stand up.
I'm a Jew. Yeah. In fact, like everyone else is kneeling down, I'm a Jew, is what he's doing. So there's an interesting dichotomy there. And I didn't mention that. This is one of the 2 books where God is not mentioned in the Old Testament. We'll get into that some more. But back to this saying about Abraham. Abraham kind of makes a miscalculation. He's like, don't tell them you're my wife. Tell them you're my sister, which is also true. And then she kind of Sarah ends up into the king's harem by mistake. Mordecai willfully enters Esther into this thing I've heard called a beauty pageant. That's not the right idea for what's going on here. This is something much spicier than a beauty pageant. Where Abram makes a mistake and makes a miscalculation that gets Sarah over here, Mordecai does it willfully. And instead of just like presenting her as here's an available young woman that is available for marriage, and maybe you could vie for her attention, maybe you could court her. Mordecai is just throwing Esther out there like meat to the wolves. Mordecai is making the same mistake, only much, much worse. And then, as the story goes, Esther becomes queen, works out at least in that, and where Abram's his plan completely backfires. Well, at first, Mordecai's plan works swimmingly. It goes exactly the way he wants because Esther becomes queen. And then Mordecai hears about this plot to assassinate the king, and he sends word to Esther. Esther tells the king and credits Mordecai. I mean, this went awesome, right? Not only has he gotten Esther into the court, but now he looks great, and she looks great. The king owes them a favor because of what they've done. This is awesome. Right after this, we have chapter 3. Anybody want to read chapter 3, verse 1? This is directly after these events where Mordecai exposes the plot. All right. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. What? we just read that Mordecai and Esther saved the king's life, and the very next sentence is this other guy who comes out of nowhere. We haven't heard of him yet. He's got an interesting backstory because he's an Agagite, which happens to be one of the old enemies of Israel, Agag. We'll get to that later. So Mordecai saves the king's life, and then one of Israel's enemies becomes the second in command. What happens when Sarai ends up in the king's harem because of Abraham's mistake? How does this get resolved? God fixes it, right? Just goes to the king in a dream, says, don't you touch her. She's Abram's wife. And God fixes everything for him. Now, if God isn't present, is not mentioned in this story, but he's the one behind the scenes pulling the strings, what has God just done? It's like, I'm not fixing this. I'm going to put you in a pickle and see what you do. So Haman is drunk on power, and it says that there's like the king orders that everyone must bow down to Haman. It's a little more unclear in the Hebrew. It basically says, Haman says that the king said that everyone has to bow down to me. And Mordecai, he wouldn't bend, he wouldn't bow. Let's find out whether he's going to burn. This is one of the questions, one of the mysteries. Why does Mordecai not bow? Here's the way I want you to think about this. You can read various theories. You can read the Mishnah. You can read about what the rabbis have said about this. There are various opinions. Don't lock on to one of those and say, this is why. This is intended to be a mystery of why he doesn't bow. What I want you to think about is, he's been compared to Abraham. Is Abraham one who is known for not bowing, or one who is known for bowing? What does Abram do when 3 visitors show up after he's just proved that he is the mightiest in the land?
He does bow to him.
The first thing he does is he comes over and he bows with his face to the ground when he has just had surgery in a very sensitive area. Remember us talking about that? And then he starts running to prepare this feast for them. At the end of his life, near the end of his life, when his wife dies and he needs to find a tomb for her, and he goes like, I want this piece of land. Let me go over and buy it. And the people are just like, oh, you can't buy this from us. You are a prince among us. You are a prince. We will give it to you. And what does Abraham do? He bows with his face to the ground. And he says, no, let me purchase it from you. Abraham is known for bowing to people that are lower than him. Just as much as he is known for his hospitality, and it's related to his hospitality, Abraham is known for bowing. And this guy, who is compared to Abraham, who makes the mistake only worse than Abraham makes, his defining character at this point is, I will not bow. Now, what's interesting is like Haman doesn't even notice this. Some other people have to come tell Haman, hey, there is this other guy. This is a guy out there. You didn't see him, but he didn't bow. What are you going to do about that? And it comes out, they ask him like, well, why didn't you bow? He says, because I am a Jew. And then Haman is going to decide to destroy all of the Jews because of this. Wasn't this backfired? Not only has he, out of his stubbornness to not bow, put a death sentence on himself, he has gotten all of his kinsmen to have a death sentence on them. They have a death sentence on them because of Mordecai and what he has done, and because he is not like Abraham.
Now, these are the Jews who have chosen to stay here, right? Because is this, have they gone back yet, or is this pre?
So actually what's happening, and we don't have a lot of time, they are now a diaspora. It's clear that like they are scattered. They're not just here. They're scattered among the whole 127 provinces. And what Haman says about them is like, they don't have a land. They're scattered all over everywhere, but they still have a national identity, and they're still following their own ways, and they don't follow your rules, king. Like they are a diaspora, a proper diaspora. They're scattered everywhere, and the edict has went out to all 127 provinces. Well, we hadn't got there yet. That they're going to die. Mordecai has blundered into this place where they're all going to die. Now, here is where it gets fascinating. Verse 7, chapter 3, verse 7. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, the pur, that is the lot, was cast in the presence of Haman to select a day and month, and the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. This is going to end up being like a pivotal verse to this whole thing. Okay, and they're going to make a holiday at the end, and it's going to be called Purim. It's named after this thing. And it says that the lot, the pur, that is the lot. Now there are two words going on here. Pur, with it's the root of Purim, it means atonement. Right? You're going to be made right. Atonement is going to be made for you, is what Purim means. But if you take this root, apparently it means lot. The only way we would know that is if it's because it tells us, because this word only appears in Esther. The word pur, meaning lot, only appears in Esther. But now we've had lots before, right? We've heard about lots. Joseph was casting lots. There were lots in the Levitical code. Well, that's the other word. When it says that is the lot, that's the other word. The first time it shows up is in Leviticus 16 when it's talking about the scapegoat. And Aaron and his sons have just made a big mistake. And God tells them, like, the only way you can come back into the sanctuary to be before me again is we got to follow this process. First, you got to get a bull and you got to sacrifice it for yourself. Then I want you to take 2 goats and I want you to cast lots. One of them for the goat, one of them before me. One of the goats is going to get set free. One of them is going to be slaughtered on your behalf so that you can be atoned for. That's the scapegoats, okay? And that's the first time that this word lot, the second lot, is used. I want you to run that through in your mind a little bit. What's going on here? A lot is being cast before the Lord to see which one's going to live and which one's going to die. And the one that's going to die is going to be an atonement for my people. The lots are being cast in the presence of Haman. He, in this case, is being put in the place of the Lord, or at least he thinks he's the Lord here. And he's casting lots for the destruction of Israel to determine the day. And there's this whole thing about like it's day by day and month by month. The idea is that like these lots like keep coming up tails until you get all the way to a year from now. And there is an idea that God is behind this in the lots, that it ends up being like the best possible scenario in the lots for Israel. But more than that, what the story is saying is that Haman thinks he's the Lord and the lots are being cast before him to see when the Israelites are going to die. And the story is saying, by using this word, no. Yahweh is Lord, and he will determine who's going to live and die. And the Israelites are not going to die today. It's going to be you, Haman. But atonement is going to have to be made. Man, we're out of time. Mordecai is going to go put on sackcloth. The cry is going to go out for the Lord, for his people. But I want you to understand, Mordecai has got to repent. This is what I want you to take away from this and think. The Israelites are in exile. How are we going to get out of exile? First, why are we in exile? Because we disobeyed God. How are we going to get out of exile? We're going to have to repent and turn ourselves back to God. Mordecai has made a huge mistake, and he's put his people under a death sentence. How are we going to get out of that? He's going to have to realize that he has done wrong, and he's going to have to repent and turn himself back to the Lord. And that's the rest of the story. We get to find out how that's going to happen. Oh, it's a good one. It's a good one.